Okay.
Oh.
And I think we're live.
It's still.
I still have off air on mine.
You do?
Yeah.
I have live on mine.
Mine says live.
Patrick and I are live.
Oh, there it goes. I'm live.
All right.
All right. Well, there we go.
Are we confirmed? All right.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining us today for our water talk. I'm Water Deeply's managing editor, Tara Lohan. So there's a lot of talk right now in California about water data. Do we have enough of it? Are we doing the right things with the information that we do have? And how are we sharing and using that data? So joining me to find out more about this are two water data experts. Patrick Atwater, who is the project manager of the California Data Collaborative, and Greg Gearheart, the Deputy Director at the State Water Resources Control Board's Office of Information Management and Analysis. So thank you both for joining me today. I wanted to start off with a question, a hard question, maybe a controversial question, and then it'll be all easy after that. But I'm curious, do you guys say water data or data?
I'm a data person.
Data. Patrick?
Data as well. Isn't that the whole thing is whether it's singular or plural?
There you go.
Right. Because technically it's like one datum and then multiple data.
All right. Now that we've got that cleared up. Patrick, I wanted to start with you by asking you a little bit about the California Data Collaborative. You guys started in the last year, and I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about what you guys are doing and why you saw the need for this organization. What was missing in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we were the only ones that saw the need for improving California's water data systems. I know Greg was part of, there was a Delta Vision white paper called for improvements broadly, New York Times, White House, Western Governors Association, you can kind of go down the list. So a lot of people saw the problem, and particularly with the historic drought, there was an urgency. So the California Data Collaborative, or CADC, was very much a kind of a bottom-up water manager-led effort to invest in new data infrastructure to ameliorate and tackle those problems, and to support water managers through tools and analytics and research in meeting their reliability objectives. And since launching in January, we've grown from 7 utilities to 10 utilities. So those utilities have grown from serving 3.7 to now 22 million Californians.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you're a utility that signs up with you guys, what does that mean? What information are you able to provide for these utilities, and what are they doing with that information?
Right. So with the drought, there's a keen focus on efficiency. So we're laser focused on metered urban water use. So like actual water use, like the data point that Tara, you as a normal Californian would pay on your water bill. And we use that to be able to kind of 3 key purposes. One, there's a rapidly evolving statewide policy landscape with the first ever mandatory restrictions, and trying to inform and be smarter about that. 2, measuring program effectiveness. So like Southern California spent $500 million on turf rebates. Like how much water did that save, right? So trying to make sure we're doing right by our citizens and ratepayers to see what's working. Mm-hmm. And then 3, particularly as you're looking at the increased focus of water efficiency, there's, water is a funny business, and that not a lot of businesses try to get people to buy less of their product. So achieving revenue stability in times of water scarcity, we have a new rate comparison tool that's open source. We're currently deploying with some of our partner utilities.
A couple questions. Can you walk me through how does a rate comparison tool work? So right now you mentioned that water utilities, some of them may be having a difficult time because people were actually really good at conserving water, which meant that revenue went down for some places. So how does your tool help them figure out different scenarios?
Yeah, so it's kind of what if. So if you were to add another tier or lower a tier, increase a tier, there's kind of an obvious question of, well, how much would that impact the bottom line in terms of revenue, and how much would that impact typical bill, so that you can, there's equity issues with low income and what have you. So we provide, it's not like a full rate study, but it's basically just kind of a high level overview so that, utilities aren't flying behind that.
Okay. And Greg, the Water Board does so many different things. You guys touch so many aspects of water management in California. Talk a little bit about the information side. What kinds of information are you guys collecting? How is it used? How is it shared?
So the Water Board is actually 9 regional water boards that cover the turf of the state. And then there's a 10th board that I work for, the state board, that serves as a headquarters shop, sort of. And amongst those 10 organizations, there are a multitude of programs, 20, 30 major programs that deal with different aspects of water. So they could be water quality driven programs, or they could be water rights driven. And we have recent sort of joined in our family, the drinking water program, and then this water conservation program that relates to utilities and the work that Patrick is doing. So there's just so many programs that are generating data. Many of them have their own enterprise data systems that collect the data. We're now getting into that mode of an organization where we're trying to figure out how to use that data and feed it back into our decision-making processes better so that we can refine that loop of what we're collecting. But we have a tremendous amount, sorry for the adjective, we have a lot of data that's being collected in our data systems.
Okay. And when you're looking at the landscape across the state, what are the limitations of the water data that's being collected now?
So, I mean, it's kind of like any organization that goes through this process. We think we know what we needed to collect when we built the database. Many of these databases are in their kind of 2nd or 3rd generation of transformation. So we're just now starting to get back to, are we collecting the right data in some of these programs that hoped that the database was going to get what they needed. So there's gaps, there's definitely gaps. There's also data quality issues, as you can imagine. So the challenges range like any organization our size. We have a lot of people and we have a lot of stakeholders. So there's just all sorts of issues that come up with both gaps in terms of we should have had that information being collected, but we're not quite collecting it the right way or at all. And then there's other issues with cleanup and making use of large amounts of data or refining it and transforming it so that it's more useful.
Mm-hmm. And also very concretely, Excel. People use Excel as a database when it's, it's a useful tool, but like I've seen over and over again, some of the reports to the state, it's all being done to Excel, which, I mean, actually the Delta Vision white paper really kind of articulates how that's, prone to manual error. It's prone to, like, it's just in one place. Oftentimes you have mission critical data that's just on like one, water use efficiency administrator's desktop, which, so it doesn't get shared internally within the organization, which is a challenge. So moving from that to kind of more modern tools, we've evolved since Excel was evolved in like the last 20 years. So there's opportunities there.
Yeah. I guess this is probably a good time to talk about AB 1755, the Open and Transparent Water Data Act that was signed by the governor recently. What do you think about this? Is this a game changer, or is it just a step in a new direction? How significant is it? Either one of you guys, or both.
Well, I'll dive in. It's probably appropriate for the state to kind of try to react to that. I think so. My agency has been trying to get into the open data world for the last couple of years using an existing open data platform that is run by the state of California. It's at data.ca.gov. And it's a pretty robust, large platform that allows a lot of agencies to participate. It points to other agencies that have open data platforms. So for the idea to come along that we need an open data mandate, it helps in some ways for the organization of all the agencies. There's actually a community of people that have to share data amongst state of California agencies that would relate to the water topic, and that's what the Dodd bill really was trying to do. But in terms of empowering my particular agency and its ability to move forward, we're kind of moving forward. We have a lot of plans to keep moving forward. The 1755 bill provides, I think, a really nice vehicle for us to start talking about this idea of how do we start mixing this data to answer questions. As you can imagine, there's a bit of a turf element that goes along with data. If you own it, it's something that you need to protect and use to ensure that your own agency's mission or what have you is being fulfilled properly. There's not a lot of incentives to share it, and that's where the bill really does sort of blast open some opportunities.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we're very interested. I mean, hoping it can be successful because it's comprehensive, right? And that's really good. And I think, part of it is sort of as consumers, like, there's some of the state data sources that we love to use, and having those more accessible is really great. And the other piece is sort of as producers, there's kind of an understandable frustration sometimes from local water utilities who are reporting similarly at various, like the monthly conservation reporting, the data that they have to report for the urban water management and the public water system statistics. Often those are reported via Excel to the state, and it's, being able to streamline that. So if we get some of these underlying kind of infrastructural questions right, which I think is what Dodd's really driving towards, it'd be good there. I thought, I also think it's kind of a good opportunity to have some like common sense approaches. I thought like Greg, what like you guys did, were like, putting, making your open data on like the GovOps open data portal is really great, because it's kind of not reinventing the wheel, and there's kind of opportunities to use that as well, like the existing tools.
Yeah, and we're trying to encourage, there's a lot of bridge building that's happening because of the Dodd bill and because of the GovOps. They migrated to a new platform. And so that new migration to their new DCAN-based platform has really opened up some bridges. And we're trying to show other agencies it's not that hard to take an important data set that you already maybe have in a flat file form,
right?
Sort of cultivate it, add the metadata, add the data dictionary requirements, and then it's on an open data platform, and you do that kind of once. You can even build in maintenance with the GovOps website that goes and scrapes your data on a weekly, daily basis. So there's a lot of pluses that come along with that opportunity.
Right.
And then it helps overcome some of the minuses, the fears that people have about, well, how's this data going to be used against me potentially, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. I mean, I think those are the people problems. I always joke that the data and the tech is the easy part. It's the administration and the coordination that's hard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because I think that's right. That it's in a sense like when it's calling, the Dodd bill calls for a platform, like there's already platforms. There's already like the DCAN instance that you're talking about is in many ways a portal. The challenge though, from my experience, is when you're integrating different data, it's all the standardization, the metadata generation, the collaboration piece. Those pieces get hard. Anything? That's what my sense.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the future in water, at least, or for sure, is going to be a federated world of different open data systems. There's not going to be a single, at least I hope not. That actually sounds like a bit of a constraint.
One database to rule them all.
Yeah, exactly. That Uber database. But,
right.
I think it's going to be a federated world. And so, but that said, you don't have to start by building your own node on this federated world. You can start learning how to do it using training wheels, so to speak, with a site that actually, it's not just training wheels, you're up and running once you load a data set on it. So it's been fun to kind of watch people's eyes open up as to the opportunities.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things, there was kind of a keen opportunity. It's a bit of a frontier because, with the drought and all the investments that people were, particularly when you're talking about like outdoor water efficiency, that's very much has like a behavioral element, which is a little bit outside the field and kind of standard of, like water utilities are historically designed to build and maintain infrastructure, right? But so like there's very much a business case in terms of how this data can be used to help improve how we're managing our water resources, which is I think where a lot of the exciting opportunities are.
Yeah. Do you guys think there's anything that is missing from the Dodd bill or anything that you wish had been included?
I actually, I'll let Patrick be the more provocative one on this one. I don't actually think there's a lot missing from it. I think it's almost not needed in a philosophical sense, but it is in a political and a reality sense. And so it served a lot of its purpose by doing that. I mean, potentially could have named other data sets and potentially named other agencies. Maybe you could have tried to expand the mandate to include interaction of state, local, and feds somehow, even though, the statutory authority is limited. There are some little tweaks, but I think it's pretty good. Yeah.
I think, Greg hit the nail on the head in terms of some of this, I work for a startup nonprofit, so we are flexible, in terms of like lack of administrative constraints. So sometimes my attitude is always like, well, why don't we just do it, and there's that kind of thing. So I think that where it landed with the timeline is kind of a good compromise. Initially it was a little bit more aggressive. It's kind of young and seeing the challenges with the drought. It's like, why not go get it done? But I think it ended up working out pretty well.
Yeah. So what's the most resistance that you're getting from people in terms of wanting to share data? I know, Patrick, you hosted a great meeting down at Stanford, I think last month or earlier this month, talking about the work that you're doing and other people in the state. And I was surprised by the reaction from some people working at water agencies about an unwillingness to share data and privacy concerns and things like that. How do you go about getting around that or getting people on board?
Yeah, so there's a ton of challenges, technically in terms of dealing with all these systems. There's a ton of legal challenges with the privacy. Everything we do is behind an NDA. And then there's also, there's trust issues. It's like this is a very mission critical data point that is. The thing is that there's definitely a business case for this, that it can help manage water better. And it's honestly, at the end of the day, when you start talking about like integrating meter reads across the state, people start to get like, hey, this is going to solve all of the California's water problems, or oh, this is going to be like what are we even doing? And it's like, I think there's kind of a pragmatic middle path where it's very, what you're talking about is very common sense things, like how are we going to manage and measure what's working to save water and the water use. So we have, when we talked at Stanford, our turf removal water savings analysis statistics published at KDD, which is a Silicon Valley conference, was 24 for every square foot of turf removed, that was 24.6 gallons of water saved. And there's other studies, but like the point though is that eliminating those barriers can really kind of help get water managers those data points they need, which in turn lets them be effective stewards for this precious resource for the people of California. So I think it takes a little bit more of a broader, and I think that really speaks to kind of the visionary investment that these water managers take to kind of take the long view. I mean, I really think that in many ways, it's funny, one of the water managers when we were launching this project had this great quote that always stuck with me. He's like, Patrick, when you talk about this like technology and big data stuff, I don't really understand necessarily what you're talking about, but I do think that data is going to be a legacy of this drought because, when you're talking about scarcity, you're talking about trying to find all these different little efficiency opportunities. And there's a big need to be, as we look with like, the drought, future uncertainty, you want to be able to be smart about all these different efficiency opportunities because then there's, that's how we're going to ensure reliability in the face of all that challenges.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you guys, do you think, how much do you think the drought is helping to drive more interest and innovation in this field?
Immensely.
Huge, yeah.
I think we exist without the drought, to be honest.
So why this time around? I mean, California's had other serious droughts before.
I think it's a perfect storm. I mean, in some ways, this data thing was starting to brew anyway.
Right.
Like I mentioned, the state agencies and a lot of the locals too were, databases were the thing to build in 2002-ish. And then now we're starting to try to use that data and the immense amount of information. And so it was kind of this brewing issue within my agency, whether the drought came along or not. And then the perfect storm is that you need information. And there was quick realization, we had daily, monthly drought reports at our board meetings where the agencies would get up in front of my board and they would, read one by one their data. And some of them, they were reading off of, like PDF printouts, I think. So it became really clear to people that there needed to be a better way to share information than have top executives show up to a board meeting on a monthly basis and read the data out loud. So there was this perfect storm of need and then this brewing, like, the feds have their own challenges with trying to get data out and security issues, but the state, it's no different. We're sort of bulging at the seams with data and the cost of building new databases, and people are asking, well, what's the purpose? Well, here it is. It's the drought and decision making.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that kind of larger context where, Obama did several executive orders on making open federal government data open by default, starting in 2013. There's been a whole slew of city open data efforts, and part of that speaks to kind of just like the maturation of the underlying technology, with like some of the technical barriers have been removed. So it's kind of like, oh, like why can't we do it? Well, it's like makes it easier to get it done. And it's also like, I mean, that's one of the things we've seen. One of our key partners and a good friend used to be the chief analytics officer of the city of New York, and same story that we're talking about, where like the systems don't want to play so the other people are, verbally reporting data, or it's locked away in like printed reports and stuff like that. And, he hooked us up with like a pro bono of some underlying technologies, world's largest repository of public data. And that's really instrumental in terms of, streamlining and automating the data across our different jurisdictions, and something that we kind of tested on some of the state public data sources, but then also integrating that into how we kind of update data across the utilities. But I think, so there's it's a confluence of trends, one, this kind of larger movement, and two, the drought has kind of provided an urgency. And one of the things I would say is that there's also an opportunity for sort of in the best tradition of the California water industry, which has done some very visionary technological achievements, like water recycling in the 90s, or like the State Water Project was very, one of the few man-made structures you can see from space. So very much like a technocratic audience. And because I think that's an important context, because some of the challenges that I have friends in the kind of broader civic data landscape, a former chief data officer of the city of LA used to say the question he always got was like, actually it was your first question, Tara, which is like, what is data? And people in the water community never really ask me that at least, because it's a very like numerate, technically savvy audience. And sometimes I think there's an opportunity to essentially kind of upgrade our tools from sort of a Excel for everything, legacy database systems, and kind of, modern tools that you see in kind of like the industry standard in other industries in California. Yeah.
That brings me actually to a question that one of our readers sent in, who actually also happens to be a water manager. It's how can we do a better job at communicating complex data to policymakers so that we can make integrated, informed decisions and ultimately help the public become better water stewards?
Visualizations can be nice.
Yeah.
If you provide like a map or a graph.
Uh-huh.
Everyone loves maps. People love maps. You put it on a map, or you put it like a graph that's over time. I think that's actually a really important question, because ultimately, as I try to tell my team, like doing all this data stuff, it doesn't actually do anything. You have to put it in the hands of a decision maker. So, part of it is, making it palatable. I think part of it is also, working hand in hand with people who have the institutional expertise, so that you really understand like what's the context behind the decision, so you can help inform that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're trying to deploy a really across the line initiative that deals with this question. We've, for a number of years before this data thing came along, we had a performance management program that was using a lot of our output kind of data, how many inspections are done, permits reissued. We have 130 some odd report cards on our website, and we're trying to migrate that into an open data world. And along that way, I found that my executives, my colleagues, like I said, we're a very large, complex organization with a lot of people in charge. And these are people that maybe went to school and used data, but they get to their job and they go to meetings and nobody really brings data back to the meetings. And so trying to get them to understand what are their questions, and then building a storytelling platform upon which they can tell their stories. They already have that piece about, sort of like the report card of their performance, so to speak, of how many inspections they said they were going to do versus how many they actually did. But what they want to be able to tell is that gap of, I didn't do enough inspections maybe in your mind, but I actually solved this important water quality problem in my bay or my river. And they want to be able to do that with data. And so we're actually, again, this idea of convergence or confluence, we're at this moment where technology can really make that palatable. They didn't have a week to sit down and write a data-driven story a year ago, but now maybe they have half a day. And with some of our skills and training, we can help them take data and tell that story and fill in that gap, and it serves their interest. So part of that is listening to what their questions are, and then helping sort of provide that capacity underneath so that they can just do it.
Yeah. It seems like getting the data and making it available to people are two important steps, but also seeing what people are able to do with the data is really been fascinating. Greg, can you talk a little bit about the Open Data Challenge that you guys had earlier in the year and the couple of the projects that came out of that?
Yeah, sure. So we were following the lead of a group at GovOps in California. It's another state agency, kind of like Cal EPA, but it's over the technology, the human resources, general services, things like that. So GovOps has been running open data for a while. They ran a challenge of their own through a statutory thing. It was called the Green Gov Challenge. And they did all this stuff, and we came along, and they luckily sort of saw that we were in need, and they provided an opportunity to help us. And when I listened to what they had to say, part of the message was, when you go out with open data, you need to sort of build some enthusiasm about it. And a great way to do that is through a competition. So we took their advice, and we ran a challenge, not knowing what we were getting into, not knowing what to expect, trying to assuage people's feelings around here that this was going to be okay and it wasn't going to be embarrassing. And eventually it turned out to be this successful project that was very low impact on us resource-wise, but huge impact in terms of conversations that started afterwards. We had 9 or 10 entries. We had international entry from Mexico City. We had 2 winners, a winner and a runner-up. One of them was a tool that really engaged our data systems and used it in a way that helped this county of Orange and their consultants prioritize inspections. So it was kind of taking data and refining it to a targeted outcome. So the other tool, or the other winner though, was equally interesting, and it was a conversation starter that built off of the water conservation data set and applied it to an energy profile data set that it had for pumping districts and pumping regions around the state within cities. And it calculated real-time, essentially, energy savings associated with water conservation, which was previously just, it was qualitatively described as, yeah, of course there'll be some benefits to energy savings, but now we actually calculated it with this tool. And so the UC Davis Center for Water Energy Efficiency was the one that got that one. And they started a whole conversation. So now there's conversations going on about this new approach of saving energy. It's actually, if you add it up on a conservative basis, the water conservations from energy, or the energy savings from water conservation, equal or exceed all the other energy measures combined. So it was this real conversation starter. So it was fascinating to me, fascinating to my board members. And so I recommend open data excitement with a challenge.
Absolutely. Do you have, for the prioritization in the Orange County, do you have a sense of how that's helped improve the actual outcomes in terms of water quality measurement and what have you?
Yeah, I don't have any new data on that other than the folks that, it's Cloud Comply and County of Orange were the 2 partners that worked on that. And they've expanded the tool. We've had meetings with them. I see them at occasional events, but they didn't just one-off this thing and enter it into a contest. They actually engaged the tool into their program. So I'm hoping that in the years to come, we're going to start hearing more and more reports about the successes associated with that. They're also expanding the tools to allow more specific questions within either industry types or watersheds. And of course, Cloud Comply is a private, Orange County is a public, so the public-private is really expanding this evangelism of open data. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. The one thing I would add though on that is, I think open data is great, though we think a little different than a lot of some of our friends across the open data landscape, not just in water, in that all the things that like GovOps is talking about, like curation standards, that's like a lot of the legwork that really needs to be done. And I think that's actually some of the stuff that's really important to get right before it's made open. And then the other piece is, in a certain sense, it's actually been a blessing that all the data that we're working with it's challenging to share because it's personally identifiable, because it makes us really focused about who we want to share it with. And we're sharing it very specifically for specific purposes, in terms of the data for Stanford, one of our partners, is looking at the effects of conservation marketing through Facebook ad experiments, and then also like UC Davis and one of our partners, actually the same guys that did that public data. But if you talk to Frank Loge, he'll talk about how that's sort of aggregate averages, and you really need to get down to the granular level to be able to do those kind of embedded energy calculations really robustly. And I think that was really one of the benefits of this is some of the, the kind of, well-valued skepticism in terms of the water managers, in terms of the value of this kind of new approach, was really valuable in terms of like making us think through what's the business case for this, and sort of like beginning with the end in mind. Because I think I've seen this in other, like in New York, sometimes when you sort of like integrate, there's kind of a desire to start with like all the data all at once, all the time, and it's a very easy recipe to kind of get very confused. And I think, so that's why I think there's kind of an opportunity in California with the drought to really take the next step beyond just these kind of opening it up in portals, which actually I think the Dodd bill kind of does in a way, because it's not just talking about the portal per se, but also like the underlying infrastructure, what I would call like how the systems play nicely together.
Yeah, no, to me, a critical piece is the human capital.
They're not just like the hackathon people. Needs to happen in the water world. More people that are software developers, data scientists, statisticians. It's kind of, would love to see more of those job titles on like, all the listings, but like Brown and Caldwell and what have you.
So we are just about at the end of our time.
Right.
I just want to ask you guys one more quick question here. If you can just say in just a few words, what you think is the most exciting opportunity right now in the water data space.
Go, Patrick.
All right.
It could be what you're doing.
I think it's that California's, future, like it's not really the data. It's really more about just like how it presents an opportunity for us all to work together so that we can adapt and, deal with all this future uncertainty with the drought and what have you. I mean, that's what's exciting, because that's what's like what really actually matters.
Yeah, and I'm excited about the opportunity that the pressure, I mean, the climate change drought kind of pressure is providing. It's also providing some clarity and a need to really focus on not just the barriers, because we could spend a lot of time worrying about the barriers to opening up and sharing our data better. But this makes us actually have to, like Patrick said, focus on the most important data sets that are needed for the most important decisions. And if you want to look to some of the data-driven stuff that's happening in Australia with water, they have these budgeting tools that are really cool. So that's the hopeful, exciting thing to me, is if we can do this.
I mean, I would love to see if we come back in like 3 years, I mean, people are pointing to, I feel like California, we should be the ones leading this, like, right? Like anecdotally, yes. Silicon Valley, like all this stuff, like the people are here, right? Like,
absolutely.
Just get it done. Anyway.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for sharing this time with us. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sarah.
It was fun.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.